Let me ask you a question. Do you ever wonder about data privacy laws and where your information is going? I mean, I don't know about you, but it seems like monthly I'm adding a new app to my phone. I'm also deleting one, but I'm usually adding a new app to my phone. And I'm using that app to make my life easier in some way. But at what cost does it come? You know, if it's a navigation app, if it's a planning app, if it's a social media app, my data is going in and it's going somewhere and I don't know who's behind it. So let's talk about that. What's up, guys? Eric Allen, founder of Planiversity, back here with you. And of course, you are listening to the Plan of Audio podcast, the travel planning and now event planning podcast. Hope you got a cup of coffee, because I'm ready to talk about data privacy laws. So I got to ask you a question. How many of you know what GDPR is, huh? That is something that Europe is becoming famous for over the last few years. Okay, I know everybody's heard about it when it comes to data privacy laws, but how much do we actually know about this? How much do we actually know about data privacy laws to begin with? And I'll tell you what spurred my thought process on this was, you know, as a business owner, as being the founder of Planiversity, one thing I'm always doing is I'm taking a look at my competitors. I'm always looking to see what my competitors are doing, what they're up to. You know, things like this are important in business. I'm sure most banks are looking. I'm sure most, hamburger joints are looking at other hamburger joints. If you think for a second McDonald's isn't paying attention to Burger King and Burger King's not paying attention to McDonald's, you're sorely mistaken, all right? You're always paying attention to your competitors. Why? Because not only do you want to remain competitive, but you want to just see what they're coming out with, what's new, something that you could possibly kind of work with and kind of stay aligned with them. I mean, how is it otherwise that countries have managed to somehow kind of stay balanced as we're moving forward, right? So since, let's take going back to the year 1900, many industrial countries have been progressing at a pretty quick rate, right? The United States being one of the primary ones, especially following World War II. And you've seen other countries progress at a very similar rate in terms of military technology, general technology, scientific research and data, medical technology, you name it. There's so many fields that it seems like we're always just kind of staying neck and neck, right? But when it comes to things like data privacy, we're definitely different, right? So I'm looking at my competitors, I'm thinking, man, one of the things that Planiversity definitely has going for it is we are an American-based company. Now, I get it. That might not mean a lot to a lot of people, but for me, being an American-based company, it has some kind of standard that comes with it, right? And for me, when I'm looking at something, a lot of times, I like to look at the background details of it, okay? I try not to take too many things at face value anymore. I like to look a little bit deeper, right? We judge a book by its cover. We don't just look at something, make a determination, and then say, hey, cool, this is not cool, something like that. But I gotta tell you, today in the year 2022, with the amount of technology that's out there, with the amount of apps that are available, with the amount of websites that are available, the different technologies that are made available to us, how many times do we actually just install something on our phone or just download something without knowing too much about it? I mean, honestly, hand to God, I am responsible for that. I have done that as well. And I continue to do that today. As a matter of fact, I just downloaded an app earlier. And then, after I download it, I'm like, man, I should probably look at the background of these. And it turns out that they're fine because of the country that they originate in is a country that comes from a position of a lot of authority, a lot of rule of law, a lot of integrity when it comes to data privacy. So no matter how benign an app or a website or a downloadable feature on a website appears, you really have to pay attention to make sure that whatever you're installing, whatever you're downloading, whatever you're putting your information into is a safe platform, right? And why does this matter? This matters because there are so many people today, especially online companies, that make money off of selling your data. Look, it's no secret, right? Everybody knows. You got your phone on. If you have an iPhone and you have Siri enabled, and you're talking about something, it could be cat litter, it could be diapers, it could be golf clubs. It doesn't matter. Next thing you know, you start seeing information coming up in your feed on Instagram, on Facebook. You start seeing ads for it. If you Google something, you start seeing ads pop up for those. Why? Because they're all linked, but at the same time, data is being retrieved from your devices. Whether you want to believe it or not, data is always being retrieved from your devices, either through microphones, through just cookies, you scanning a page, you looking at a page, you Google searching something. That information is being fed somewhere, and somebody is using that information to exploit the situation by trying to shove more of that in your face, right? So if I decide, hey, I want to start buying a really good quality kitty litter for my cat. Now, this is one example I'm just going to go with. But if I say I want to buy some really good kitty litter, something that doesn't, stink that much, something that absorbs odor better, something that is just a better quality all around and not too expensive. I start doing some research on Google. I start pulling it up on my phone, not even doing Google. Maybe I just start looking on Instagram. Maybe I start looking at different things, talking about it. And next thing you know, everything is just bombarding me with cat litter commercials, cat litter advertisements, you name it. I've had this happen. I've had this happen with gyms. I'm looking at gyms, I'm looking at types of workout routines, I'm looking at types of fitness, exercises, nutritional facts, you name it. And next thing you know, I'm being bombarded with ads. And why? It's because all of your devices are listening one way or another. And when I say listening, I don't mean like, the microphone is always on and the microphone's always listening to you. I mean, in a sense of there are cookies installed on your device. When you go to certain websites, there's a cookie, there's a little data file that's installed. And sometimes, like I said, it's a very benign process. It could be Amazon. As you're shopping, you're going through the website, you're hitting certain things. There's a cookie that's tracking you and your progress and making sure that those items in your cart are not lost, right? Now, if I'm shopping and I continue shopping, that cookie is going to be active throughout that process. And then when it's over, it's over. Now, that's what you would call a necessary cookie, or we'll just call it necessary cookie for right now. Okay. We'll keep it simple. And then there's other ones. There's statistic cookies, right? When you go to a website, they want to pay attention to what you're doing with their website, where you're clicking the most, where you're stopping your research. I'm not going to lie. I mean, I use Google Ads, and we actually pull that data as well when it comes to just through Google. Okay. So what happens is you install a file on your website, you install a Google tag, and you'll know up to the point where users go, and you say, okay, my audience is really enjoying the service. They're getting all the way up to this point, and then everything seems to drop off, and that's it. And then you can use that information to improve on your service, to build it, to tweak certain things, to reach out to your audience and let them know, hey, we've made improvements in this area. You might want to try this service again. Those are also very benign cookies to have. All right. So you have the necessary, you have the statistics, and then you have the marketing cookies, which is the ones that I'm talking about. Okay. That's the ones where that little digital file, that data file is stored in your device, and now they're paying attention to a lot of things that you're doing. Okay. It's not only what you're doing on the website, what you're searching, it's also your behavior outside of that. How many times have you installed an application and it's asked you right now or right up front, can the app track you? Can it track you? And no, for me, the answer is always no. And the reason why that is because if I'm traveling from, the Philadelphia area and I'm going down to Atlanta, I might be down in Atlanta and all of a sudden I start getting these ads for maps. I start getting ads for Atlanta-based companies. Somebody out there is paying attention and they know that Eric likes really good restaurants and Eric's in Atlanta. You put those two pieces of information together and now all of a sudden I'm getting ads for Atlanta-based restaurants, Atlanta companies, you name it. There's so many ways you can go with it, but it doesn't just stop there, okay? Some of the things that you really want to pay attention to, especially the value behind the GDPR in Europe or the European Union, is that it protects you in certain ways, okay? It protects you in ways that other locations, other countries around the world will not protect you, okay? One of those ways is it makes it necessary for the company to erase your personal data. And even if the company doesn't do it automatically, you can request through the company to make sure that your personal data is erased if you're done doing business with them. Okay, that's very important. That's significant. All right. Cookies are the other one. Another one is compliance fines, right? The European Union has in this GDPR a compliance fine. So if there's a company based in the EU that doesn't comply with these regulations, they can get hit with a serious fine to essentially slap them on the wrist to show them that this is a serious type of business. Okay. A country should be held accountable for ensuring that there are laws in place to punish people that use your data incorrectly. And I have to tell you, there are a lot of companies out there today who are in the business specifically to sell your personal information. Why do we think that identity theft is on the rise? Why do we think that's one of the most prolific crimes that is still in existence in 2022? I mean, you would think with all the safeguards, all the measures, you know, every year when I do my taxes, one of the things that I add into the package is to make sure that I have identity theft protection. All right. I want to make sure that in the event somebody tries to steal my identity, that there's some kind of insurance on that and that I'm protected, and that there is a service continuously monitoring my credit that's going to send me an alert if somebody from Brazil decides to apply for a loan in my name. You know, all those types of things are very important. So one of the things I wanted to tell you is, when I was doing a search and looking at my competitors, I noticed, and I'm not going to drop any names, but I noticed that quite a few of my competitors come from countries outside the United States and the EU. Now, for me, what I'm going to recommend to you is if you are installing an application on your phone, your device, your tablet, doesn't matter. If you're installing or if you're working with a website that you're putting information in, I would pay attention to which country it's coming from, okay? Because there are certain countries around the world where there is no protective net in place to protect you, which means your data goes into wherever that company is, and that company is free to use your data without punishment, without repercussion. You know, it snowballs from there, okay? So one of the places I've noticed, or a few of the places that I've noticed that these companies are coming from is India, Singapore, Indonesia, China, Russia, Belarus, a lot of these countries where they are actually known for having intellectual property theft. Very few data privacy laws in place, very, very little enactment of laws protecting users and their data. And that's a very big deal, right? So I started doing a little bit of searching and I started digging into this, and I found this website called propertyrightsalliance.org. I'm going to go ahead and pull this up for you. And one of the things that I want you to take notice of is this is a 2021 report, okay? Now it says with regard to intellectual property theft, a survey was conducted, a study was conducted of many countries around the world, and they found that based on the data that they were receiving, that there was a certain group of countries that kept hitting the top of the list as far as what they say the usual suspects for this type of thing, which is intellectual property theft, okay? And those countries being China, India, Mexico, Russia, and Indonesia, okay? That means that this independent organization conducted a study, and they found that if your information was likely to be stolen, the individuals had a higher chance of coming from those countries, okay? The next line that's highlighted under that says, and I quote, "All of these countries have been known to serve as hubs for intellectual property theft," unquote. All right, so what does that mean to us? That means a lot, right? That means that if I'm doing business with a company out of China and I'm feeding them data. Look at TikTok. There's been a lot of talk about TikTok over the years and how TikTok is actually a country or it's a company that was founded in China, and that company actually has ties to the Chinese Communist Party. That's a pretty big deal, right? That means that your data, your privacy information is now spanning outside of just that company, and it's actually getting into a political atmosphere. Okay, which means it's getting into a completely different organization that's able to manipulate and use that information for reasons other than what you agreed to. All right. Now, I know we've all been told, we've all heard the rumors. Okay, TikTok, we're not collecting that data. We're not doing anything like that. And I can tell you that the more research that's done, the more it's found out that that is actually not exactly true. So this is a very, very, very important thing to take a look at, especially when it comes to something like TikTok, where you're not only giving it information, but now you're recording, you're posting locations, you're showing personal information, you're showing family members, you're showing so much information, and that information is being collected in a place where there's no privacy laws in place to protect your data, which means it can be used and manipulated as they see fit. All right. So look, I started doing a little bit more research, just like I said, it snowballs. I started looking into more things. All right. And one of the other things that I found was this other organization called the International Property Rights Index.org. All right. That is their website. And this is what I found, right? You're able to actually scroll through and do comparative data on these countries and find out how they rank and how they compare with one another. Now, this is definitely some quantitative data. This is what you want, especially if you're a person who really respects the rule of statistics. All right. Now, what they do is they're looking at all these different things, these different aspects of society, of law, of culture, etc., and they're kind of measuring it and giving you a matrix. So what I did was I conducted a study of a comparison, rather, of China, India, Sweden, Russia, and the United States. So Sweden being one country in the EU, the United States being obviously the United States, China, India, and Russia being three of those countries in the list for those top culprits for intellectual property theft. All right. And this is what I saw. So this might not mean a whole lot to you when you look at this graph right here, but when you start to scroll down, you can start to see some more tangible data, right? Things that you can look at, bar graphs, things that actually make a little bit more sense to you, even if you're not really good at reading graphs. All right. So what we see right here is when it comes to this type of data, now everything is measured, right? Everything is given a numerical score, and the higher you score, that means the more compliant you are, the safer you are, or the more organization and structure that you have in these certain areas. All right. Now let's just use 0 as being worst case scenario and 10 as being, all right, this person couldn't get any better. This is where they're at. They're killing it as far as compliance, as far as organization, as far as law and structure, you name it. That's where they can't get any better. So when you look at this graph and you see that spans from 2007 to 2022 with United States and Sweden being at the top. Now, you're like, the top of what? This doesn't really matter, or this doesn't make sense to me, but I've got it narrowed down into intellectual property theft or intellectual property rights protection. All right. So they're saying that based on this chart alone, that if you look, if you fall within that Sweden or United States over the span of the years, you see that these more Western countries have been noted for having better structure in this area, better levels of protection. And then, of course, you start going down the chart and you see it's followed by China, and then by India, and of course, at the bottom, you have Russia. Now, does that mean that these places are bad? No, it doesn't mean that India is bad. It doesn't mean that China is bad or Russia is bad. It just means how susceptible is your information to being used for purposes other than how you intend or how you believe it'll be used, and what safeguards are there in place to prevent these things from happening and to protect your personal data. And what this is saying is, when it comes to these three countries, they rank pretty significantly below Western countries, being United States and Sweden in this case. All right. So moving on down to this other graph off to the side, one of the things that I really want to pay attention to, now there's all sorts of facets here. You got trademark protection, you've got copyrights, you've got intellectual property, legal and political, perception of IP protection. Now, one thing that I absolutely paid attention to was rule of law. Rule of law is everything, right? What kind of society do we have when there's no rule of law, or where there's a diminished rule of law? That means higher rates of crime, higher problems. It's just across the board, you're just going to run into more problems when dealing with companies from these places, because you know what do they have to lose? If there's less agencies in place to hold them accountable for using your personal data incorrectly or illegally, there's no consequences, right? If I think that there's a 50% chance that I'll actually have to do anything more than just pay a fine, I might be, as a bad guy, I might be tempted to use information and say, hey, cool, I'm going to do this. Now, of course, with certain cultures comes a certain level of ethical standards and morals and principles. That's a completely different conversation, all right? But when we're talking about law, the rule of law, the protection of intellectual property, the protection of personal data, these things matter, all right? And when I look at these countries, I'm looking at this line right here, the rule of law, and we are seeing that the lowest ranking on this scale of these countries measured in this comparative study is Russia with nearly a 3.5. That is terrible. Now, this is over the span of what? We're looking at 15 years, right? So at the top of this would even be not the United States, but Sweden in this comparative study. Now, Sweden's a smaller country, different standards of living, different ethical standards for the people. I mean, it's not the United States, right? That's what we know, or we know what we know. Europeans live a little bit differently. They have different standards for what they think is right or wrong, same as Brazil, the same as Argentina, the same as Japan, so on and so forth, right? But in this study, we see that toward the bottom, you have Russia and China at the very bottom, followed by India. All right, Sweden is pretty close to the top with that 8.6%, and the United States being at a 7.7, which tells me the United States could be much better than it is, but at least we are not down in the bottom. You know, if we ranked below a 5, that'd be pretty significant. That would say that even though we live in one of the most advanced countries in the world, our rule of law, our protection in place, our things, our safeguards that are in place to protect people and their rights and their property and their intellectual property and their data is diminished, right? And we don't have that. We actually score pretty high, comparatively speaking. Although we could be better, we are not doing all that bad. But when it comes to the rule of law, I'm looking at countries like India, I'm looking at countries like China and Russia, and them being the culprits found in that other study of who is at the top of the list in terms of intellectual property theft. And those things matter to me. So what I want to tell you is, if you plan on installing apps, if you plan on using these travel planning apps, it doesn't matter. It can be any kind of app out there. Really pay attention to who the creator of that is. Now, one thing you do really have to pay attention to is companies that are starting to get sneaky. I've seen several overseas companies that will actually business partner with somebody here stateside, and they'll actually incorporate stateside. So I could tell you there was one that I dealt with several years ago. I was looking for a software development firm, and I saw, this is the funny thing, I saw that not only were they located in the United States, but they were literally incorporated only 3 streets over from where my business is incorporated with. And of course that excited me. I'm thinking, this is awesome. This is awesome because if I actually have any issues, I can have face-to-face conversations with these people. And so I asked them about it. I said, hey, I see that you're located up on King Street. And they said, yeah. So I started doing a little bit of studying. I look at the Google Maps and I see that it's just an abandoned. It's a warehouse, you know, it looks abandoned. I don't know if it's abandoned, but it looks abandoned in the imagery. And what it turned out to be was that the bulk of the company was actually located in India, while their corporate headquarters was located right here in a state that's very easy to incorporate. not only is it easy to incorporate, but you can incorporate here if you're not even a resident. So you really got to pay attention to those types of things. But one thing I can tell you is just pay attention. Pay attention to who you're downloading. Pay attention to who you're installing on your phone. Pay attention to who you're allowing to track you, okay? Because if I allow a certain app to track me, then it's feeding off of that data. And it not only feeds off that data, but it knows what to use that data for, to throw ads in my face, to try and sell me more things. And worst case scenario, it's using my information to make a profit by selling it to somebody else who's going to do exactly what I thought they would do, which is throw ads in my face. So my suggestion is, if you're going to do business with a company, especially when it comes to travel, since your privacy, your safety is key. If I'm going to the other side of the world, I want to make sure that I'm protected. I don't want somebody that I can't see, that I don't know, that I don't even talk to, knowing my whereabouts. All right. I'm not giving anyone permission to track me. I'm very picky about who I want to install when it comes to certain apps. Other ones where I'm just playing a little thing on there, Angry Birds, something like this. I'm not super picky about that, because really what's going to happen with that? All right. But when it comes to anything serious, business apps, banking apps, calendar apps, travel apps, you got to be very, very picky about who you're installing on your phone or on your app or on your tablet, whatever. You have to be very picky, because that information could be used to hurt you in the end. I really hope this information helps. I really want you to pay more attention. When it comes to Planiversity, we don't sell data. We don't even store data. Not interested in that. I am an American-based company, and we will not steal your data. We have no interest in doing that. Everything that we do is done with integrity. And that's how it is through most Western countries. So if you're not dealing with someone in the United States and somebody in Europe, or a company in the United States or Europe, really pay attention. Western countries, Australia would be a good one. Canada would be a good one. When you start spanning outside of those, really look at the indexes. Pay attention to who is most susceptible for stealing your data and who's likely to be punished for doing so. Hope this helps. If you have any questions, always reach out to us. We love comments. We love emails. plans@planiversity.com. Have a great day. Safe travels.